Why do Black horse people have to keep proving themselves in something we've always been a part of? When it comes to genres, identities, and narratives, we know that history is written by the ones who were the conquerors. But at this point, we should be encouraged to question that history, to take the stories that have been passed down in our own families and set some new expectations for how we move in the future. These are the questions that I have been reflecting on since I went to my first Beyoncé concert last week, July 4th, in Washington, D.C. for the Cowboy Carter tour. And we're going to get into it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history, why it is so significant, some of the messaging and the language that she uses, and what we can take from this experience that she's offering us into the future, into our own livelihood. And yeah, we're gonna break that down, because I'll tell you, Cowboy Carter was an experience. Hey y'all, I am Aubriana, and this is Black in the Saddle. It is a space where we talk about the impact and influence of Black people on the horse industry. And that includes the media, that includes the mainstream, that includes what influences how people think when we walk into the barn, into the arena, into the boardroom, honestly, based on who we say we are, what we enjoy, and the lifestyle that we live. So let's get into some Beyoncé things, okay? I've got notes here because I did quite a bit of research, and I'm going to include a lot of the references that I am sourcing in the show notes. So please know that you will be able to find these links in the show notes, whether you're looking in the, I say down here for the people watching, or in your favorite podcast player, okay? And also you'll find it on the Black in the Saddle website, because there will be a blog post for each episode. Let's start with the word genre. This episode is titled "Genres Are a Funny Concept, Aren't They?" And this is a line that is in the album by Linda Martell. She was a country artist, a Black country artist. And, you know, like many stories that we've heard, someone not recognized until well past after she was deceased. So I want to speak a little bit about the word genre, because people feel safe when they're able to categorize something. The definition of genre is a category of artistic composition characterized by similarities in form, style, and subject matter. And it is human nature to feel more safe when you can identify similarities than when you identify differences. You can see that in your own life. You can see that in looking at the media. You can know for yourself, like, if I see something that stands out, it stands out because it's different, right? And so that if it doesn't immediately put you into, oh, what is that? It's like, okay, you know, why is that different? What does that difference mean? It provokes more questions, and you hope to get answers, right? That is how genres have come to be. That is the categorization that shows up when there's a similarity in style. And pretty much what Beyoncé is offering us is, why do we have to let a genre define us? Despite how safe someone may feel because they're able to draw those similarities, why does that have to be an influence on how we operate and how we make decisions and what we do next, right? I like to think that Beyonce's genre, you know, I grew up with Destiny's Child. Grew up watching her evolution. She has touched almost every musical genre that I know of. I'm not a musician, so that don't even say that much. But mainstream music genres. And at this point, the genre is Beyoncé. And I think that she has brought so much just content and work, and just her body of work. The genre is simply Beyoncé. It is not, she's a pop artist. She's an R&B artist. She's a country artist, right? It's Beyoncé. So let's get into a little bit of the history, because when I was at the concert, one of the things that stood out to me was like, baby, the visuals are at the concert. I know part of the Beehive has been like, oh my gosh, when are we going to get more visuals? When are we going to get more music videos? When are we going to get like the visual album that I think Lemonade was? I think, can't remember. Or maybe it was Beyonce. I don't know. See, I'm not part of the Beehive, okay? I just respect Beyonce, all right? Anyway, the visuals are at the concert. And there were some really stark visuals that stood out to me that I just wanted to connect some threads back to the history of Black cowboys and cowgirls. Now, Black cowboys and cowgirls were not a footnote of the American West. They were part of the foundation. You have likely heard statistics, 1 in 4 cowboys in the American West was a black cowboy. You have likely heard stories about the Buffalo Soldiers, who were an elite group of the military, the American military, who were sent west to obliterate Native peoples. There's a lot of details in that. We could do a whole different episode on that. But those are some of the things that we have been told about our presence in westward expansion, and this idea and this narrative that is like the freedom and the wilderness and the amount of grit needed to survive in this new frontier, right? Those are kind of the stories, and that's how you get this caricature of the American cowboy that the world knows, right? It is a tough, this outlaw, but also, just trying to grind it out for their family, just trying to survive in this new territory, defending themselves, the violence attributed to it. All of that is not necessarily a story that Black people have been a part of largely. When you get more specific or even care to know additional details, you start to find different mentions of Black cowboys here and there and how they show up in Hollywood, which influences a lot of the perceptions of them, as well as in the stories in people's families. This album itself, Cowboy Carter, is really about the reclamation of that culture and the narrative and the naming of the Black identity, especially as it relates to country music and the country lifestyle. One of the biggest transitions that was like, oh, okay, girl, when she started the concert with American Requiem, and then went into the national anthem. But it wasn't the regular national anthem. It was the Jimi Hendrix version. She was singing over his guitar version of the national anthem. And then that went into her song Freedom. I'm not sure if you knew this. I had to do a little bit of research, but the Jimi Hendrix version happened in the 1960s. I think it was 1967. Jimi Hendrix was a veteran. He was honorably discharged from the military and grew into this huge artist, rock artist. And this was his form of protest for senseless war. I believe it was the Vietnam War at the time. That in his playing of the national anthem, it sounded like war. Like, I don't know how many of y'all listen to electric guitars, but it sounded like chaos and bombs and sirens and screams. The very violence that the national anthem lyrics talk about, that is exactly what it sounded like in his delivery of that. I think that choosing that version is also a protest, or is paying homage to that protest to say, y'all, it's broken. This freedom that we say that we are fighting for is so restrictive. She went right into her song, freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose. That freedom that we have been fighting for has created the same restrictions that we are trying to get out of. And as we look at what's going on across the globe and how our current administration has just created so much tension with senseless war and the potential to be going to war again, I think that was just such a timely moment. I saw an article that described Jimi Hendrix as a dandified cowboy. And we know the black dandy was just the theme of the Met Gala. And so I just thought that overlap was so strategic and so significant and so spot on, and such something that Beyoncé would do. One of the next kind of parts of history that show up for me from this concert was my outfit inspiration was the song Levi Jeans. I love that song. I feel like it is underrated on this album. However, Levi Jeans is also about reclamation. If you are not aware, Levi's, or not Levi's specifically, but denim is a derivative of a textile called Negro cloth. And that was this just coarse cotton material that was only reserved for enslaved people. You had to wear those kinds of clothes to signify that you are a laborer. You are an enslaved person. White people did not wear Negro cloth because that would mean that they are that laborer. It is a status symbol and a symbol of low status in the American class system. Not only is denim a derivative of Negro cloth, but it also involves a process of being dyed with indigo. Indigo is a plant that came from West Africa. And so enslaved people from West Africa who were able to bring that plant over and cultivate those seeds and know what to do with them, cultivating the process of dyeing fibers with indigo. They were the ones that were exploited for the very thing that classified them as enslaved. So as Levi created a brand around denim, they stole the indigo making process from enslaved West Africans and was able to make quite a lot of money from that. The whole just connection, and I know you've probably seen some commercials and things that she's done with Levi. Or the significance of that whole relationship is so that we can have conversations like this, so that we can talk about what was stolen and what is going to be reclaimed every single time. Now, my outfit, I deconstructed 3 pairs of jeans. I think it was 2 Wranglers and 1 pair of Levi jeans. And me and my sewing machine and a lot of patience developed an outfit. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it was a vibe. Okay, she put that ish on. All right. But jeans, you know, denim, it went from being this Negro cloth, this association with labor, to after emancipation and into like the civil rights movement, it is now this like rebellion and this counterculture costume, right? People purchase denim like for coal mining and all of this really hard work that contributed to what the American dream was, right? So we have this recharacterization of a significance of this look. So now it's cool, when before it was reserved for exclusion. And I feel like that is kind of where we are again today. I know a lot of my friends who we've been talking about this, how country has become cool thing. That's just in our generation, right? And so looking back, we can see, okay, this has happened before. This has happened before. It'll happen again. What happens when the trend is gone? How does that impact us and our ability to continue in this livelihood? We can look back and see what has happened previously, because these kinds of things cycle over and over. Cowboy Carter is a tool for rebellion and genre bending, honestly. We're going to go back in history fast a little bit about Beyoncé. You know, she performed with the Chicks at the CMAs, I believe, and people were big mad. They were already mad at the Chicks, right? Because the Chicks did not support the war in Iraq and they did not support George Bush. But then she didn't win Album of the Year. She references that in the album. And then this past Grammys 2025, she won Country Album of the Year. Immediately after that,
the Grammys announced that
they are going to have 2 categories for Country Album of the Year. There's going to be a traditional and a contemporary category. And when I saw that, I couldn't do anything but laugh, because it's textbook, y'all. It's textbook. Every time a Black person excels in something that is white dominated, they change the rules. They change the rules. They move the bar. They move the field goal. They create a rule that says, no, not like that. And I think that this is just a beautiful lesson for us to say, okay, my success, or however I show up, will never be enough for someone who is committed to moving the bar. So knowing that, how does that influence how you show up in the future? How does it influence how you show up for yourself? I see conversations online about how how to have hard conversations with people in your barn, in your horse environment who may not look like you, or how to deal with critique that's coming from trainers. I'm not saying that the critiques are not valid, and I'm not saying that the conversation should not be difficult, but I'm saying if you are in a situation with people who are committed to misunderstanding you or committed to moving the bar, no matter how much you adjust yourself, you start to ask yourself, when am I going to stop adjusting who I am for other people? And the whole CMAs thing with Beyoncé just was a message to me, right? To say, girl, just live. Just live and take inspiration from the excellence around you and show up and do your best and set standards for yourself that make you feel proud and make you feel happy for the work that you're doing and how you show up for other people. Now, you know, I love words. So we're going to go back to some definitions because words mean things. So when we're talking about culture and the difference between traditional and contemporary, traditional represents cultural values, beliefs, and practices passed down through generations. Contemporary reflects current trends, innovations, and modern ideas. And when I look at this word traditional, it's like, okay, cultural values, beliefs, and practices passed down through generations. Whose generations? If I was to say, yes, I grew up with black cowboys and black cowgirls, and they taught me these things that come from a legacy and a line from black agrarians. What I consider passed down in my generations could very much be traditional. Whereas mainstream or people who don't look like me could see that as contemporary. Oh, it's modern and edgy. It's a trend when it's very much legacy. Like, nah, that's how we are able to define these things, how we are able to define the work that we do and the lifestyle that we live. We simply have to know that it's going to show up differently for different people, okay? Those words, they do have meaning, but those meanings change in context. So if I'm looking at my own life and what's traditional and contemporary in my own life, that's going to be different from what I see in mainstream media. And I have to be able to adjust and not let that impact what I find to be important or how I show up in the horse world and with you all. Some of the visuals at the concert were absolutely stunning. They kind of came in her outfit change times, but there was one, she had the American flag and she had a kind of like a crochet veil over her face. One of my other favorites was her as the Statue of Liberty, but she had the sash. I know you've seen the Cowboy Carter sash, but the sash said Reclamation of America. So when we say that this album is her dedication and reclamation of the narratives that were placed on her, that's not a guess. She said it. She said it in the visuals. There's also at the end the Statue of Liberty that has a mask on. We already know how difficult masks were for Americans in the pandemic, okay? I think that is a representation of the sheer embarrassment. How do we say we stand for liberation and the only offering of freedom that we have is so restrictive and only for particular people? And then one of the last ones that I had to do a little bit more research on was this, the sharing of spaghetti westerns. There's a song called Spaghetti on the album. But if you don't know, spaghetti westerns are Western films that were filmed in Italy. And I was in Italy 2 years ago, and I remember taking a bus to a winery and thinking like, wow, this looks just like California. That's so crazy. And because I am a sommelier, I was only thinking about grapes at the time and wine. But I was thinking about how the different geographies are so similar. So that gives them the ability to grow similar things. And so spaghetti westerns were filmed in Italy, and there is one called Lola Colt or Black Tigress. And the actress is a black woman named Lola Falana. And this, I'll include a link to this because you can watch it on YouTube. This is an hour-long spaghetti western of this black cowgirl that is a performer, and she is having to stand up for her squad of other dancers. And I watched almost all of it. It is so good. If you like westerns, you definitely should give it a watch. But Beyoncé makes reference to these spaghetti westerns in that you didn't see them. You didn't see black cowgirls in regular westerns like the Hi-Ho Silver, the Gunsmokes, the Ponderosa. You didn't see them in those, but spaghetti westerns offered that visibility and as a main character, as a protagonist in that. The opportunity for a black woman to show how she is continuing to center her identity in the stories that she's telling. She's like, hey, this exists despite historically being excluded from this space. We were here, and there's evidence of that. And I like to believe that if it shows up in Hollywood one time, it is likely in the real world a lot, right? Especially like the character arcs or the actual stories. Not saying like Iron Man or superheroes, but mainstream media shows these stories because of how they show up in our day-to-day lives, and that offers us something to relate to. So watch Lola Colt or Black Tigress, and I would love to know what you think. We might have to do like a little movie screening or something like that. I'll figure it out. Even with that representation, there was some of the set on the concert, where I was like, she is not going to let you forget about the things that she's associated with. If you haven't seen any pictures of the concert, it's kind of got this star or like triangle shaped walkway in the middle of the stadium. And on one side of it, it said saloon. That was the side that I was on. And on the far side from me, it said salon. And so as she's putting out this performance on the saloon side, she sits and she drinks her Sir Davis whiskey, which I believe is named after her grandfather, which was a moonshine man, also from the lyrics. She's got this whiskey and she drinks it, and there's that product placement there, right? And then on the other side, she's got a salon and a one of the over-the-top hair dryers, the circles. Y'all been natural my whole life, so don't come for me about not knowing the names of stuff, okay? But the hair dryers, it says salon on that side, and she's got Sacred, the hair care line. And so I just thought that was so clever, and how she's like, I'm not gonna be afraid to tell you or to show you what I have created and to show you the intersection in this narrative. That is something that I feel like Beyoncé does so well. She's like, this is what I got. This is what I got. And it is a part of a larger story. I feel like she's so strategic in how she puts out this story of who she is or who she's about to be. And we get to come along with her in that. And I think that's why, you know, people really respect her craft and why she's every celebrity's favorite celebrity, because not everybody can do that. It's not necessarily about being talented anymore. It is about having the skills and the strategy behind that story so that everything that you create falls into place. And that is something that I am trying to learn to do better as I grow my business, Black Unicorn Creative, and I continue to put out content for Black in the Saddle and continue to write and illustrate the Cowgirl Cameron children's books. I always moved previously. I moved like those were different entities. And lately I have been trying to do a better job of cross-pollinating. And instead of showing up as a piece of myself in every space that I'm creating, I can show up as one whole person and say, this is me, and I do these 3 things. And that is that. And so I know this episode may feel a little bit more like an analysis, but if you didn't know, I'm a nerd. And this is the kind of stuff that I do for work. So I'm offering a little bit to you here, as well as a yes, we can think critically about what we see and how we are represented. We can also criticize it, right? Because Beyoncé is a capitalist, okay? She's gonna say, run me my money, all right? But we can also learn from her and criticize her and learn from her and do it all with love, because we want people to do that for us. Like I said before, I do not consider myself part of the beehive, but I do have the ability to respect and relate to the level of craft and artistry and excellence that she shows up with, right? That is why she is your favorite celebrity's favorite celebrity. When I was at the concert, you know, and even leading up to it, I felt like the energy that comes from knowing this is where you're going to go and knowing that you're going to experience this much excellence, it's infectious, okay? I made a post that said, I apologize for how I acted because I knew I was going to a Beyoncé concert. I also apologize for how I'm about to act because I just went to a Beyoncé concert. And I mean it. But the energy was so infectious. I feel like this experience pulled out an old skill of mine to make something brand new. Like, I pulled out my sewing machine. And, you know, I'm not a professional sewer, tailor, nothing. I don't know how to use a pattern, but I got creative and I was able to make a halter top and some jeans with my sewing machine. And just that creativity and doing it within community. I mean, at the concert, it was like, oh, girl, look at your outfit. Oh, girl. And I'm like, thank you, girl. Look at yours, okay? Dressed down. We were able to share the love and share compliments and just be swept up in how creative people were in community. And that is something that we really need right now. right? We really need the opportunity to be in community with other people who are just as excited about something, or just as passionate about something, or are not afraid to acknowledge the effort that you put in, so that you can feel good about what you're doing and how you're moving forward, and knowing that you're not doing it alone. So we were squealing, child. We were squealing. I got a free ice cup because my outfit was cute. And you know how much a cup costs at a stadium? I was appreciative. One of my favorite scenes from the concert, the favorite vignettes or the things that she's putting up on screen, was when it said, oh, this was actually after the national anthem. It said, never ask for permission for something that already belongs to you. I feel like that kind of sums up this entire trend, right? Not even just Cowboy Carter, which is Act 2, Act 1, which is Renaissance. It is asking yourself, what does it mean to stop waiting for validation? What does it mean to stop seeking permission to belong in a space that you already have a home in? You just have to find it. How do we navigate the horse world as Black and brown people when we know that we are instrumental in creating it and will be instrumental in sustaining it going forward? When we are talking about immigration issues and issues with all of the isms that come up in our industry and the world, because our industry is an absolute reflection of our world. How do we show up boldly in that, knowing that we're not asking for permission to have a place? We're returning to, because we know our history, we're returning to a place we already were. There's a level of comfort and confidence and validity in knowing that you're going back to something that already was there. You're not trying to do something brand new. This is an innovation. Showing up as a Black horse person is not innovative. It's brave right now, but it was brave back then, right? It's necessary now, and it was necessary when Bill Pickett was doing it. When the first Black jockeys were racing in the Kentucky Derby. When they started having rodeos after the white rodeo so that they could get some time riding the bulls because they got too good to compete with white people. How do you show up differently when you don't need that validation? When you don't need permission? So, I know this was a little bit different than what previous episodes were like. I would love to know what you think about episodes like this. A little bit more analysis, a little bit more breakdown, a little bit more resource heavy, and speaking to different points in history. And what did you learn that you didn't know already? I would love to know. You can leave it in a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can leave it in a comment on social media. I'll be sharing some clips from this episode on there. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I will see you next week for another episode, Black in the Saddle.